Hello, this is Gabriel Pictet from the National Society Development Services Department at the IFRC, and I'm here to present to you the Moti graphs. So I'm assuming that you know about Moti and motiro.com, that you've actually used the app to learn about your team or your branch, what motivates your volunteers or your staff. So I won't go into that right now. In this presentation, I would like to show you a different set of graphs. And these are the graphs that we use in developing country or branch level reports, where we can compare different teams among each other and do some further analysis to better understand the mechanisms by which volunteers or staff can be motivated or not. Let's start by looking at the survey questions themselves and see how we go from a survey question to the actual data that is presented and used in both the Moti graphs and the graphs I will show you next. So you recognize these three bar graphs from the automated Moti survey reports. These are about well-being, and you recognize the three questions that go into the well-being indicator. At work or in my volunteering activity, I feel strong and vigorous. At work, I feel frustrated or I feel emotionally drained. Now, the bar graphs, as you probably know already, represent the distribution of answers for each questions. The questions are on a Likert scale. So for the well-being questions, it's a frequency of feeling that goes from 1, never, to 7, always, and anything in between. And then we have the composite indicators. So for well-being, it's the average of the three scores, transformed to a 5-point Likert scale. And we can already tell you that for each range of averages, we can make an assessment and evaluation of the level of well-being within a team or within a branch. So if it's between 4.5 and 5, we would say it's a high level of well-being. If it's below 3.5, it's low. It's low end of concern. And if it's actually below 3, we would say that this needs to be looked into. That would be very low well-being and risk of burnout. Here, since it's about the well-being dimension of motivation, we have a score in this team of 3.2, which, as you can see from the scale on the top bottom right of your screen, that's between 3 and 3.4. That's low well-being. It is of concern. Now, we will look at how we can actually describe the data set using some very simple indicators, which you probably all remember from high school, and some simple visualizations. Here you have what we call violin plots. Each square, each one of these 6 squares is one dimension. The first at the top left is well-being, so this corresponds to the well-being score that we saw in the previous slide. And you have here what we call violins. We have blue violins and orange violins. Blue represents volunteers, and orange represents staff. And then we have 3 countries, Mexico, Finland, and Cyprus. We selected these 3 countries because they're the countries that had the most volunteers and the most staff. Many more nationalities have done Moti surveys, but usually it's just among staff or just among volunteers. You have here a vertical dotted line, and this vertical dotted line represents 3.5. So anything to the left of that dotted line would be problematic in terms of well-being. Now, as you might have guessed, these violin plots represent the concentration of answers, or the concentration of scores, rather. You might be able to see that there's a white dot somewhat at the middle of the violin. That would be the median value of that distribution. We'll see what a median is in a few seconds. So I'll let you ponder these Venn graphs. You can see that you have a sort of long tail here. You see that you have the majority of people that are sort of bunched up around here, or around here, around here. So that gives you a visualization of how people responded to these series of questions and where they stand when it comes to these indicators. So for example, Cyprus staff, the median is here, the majority of people around here, and that's between 3 and 3.5. So that's rather low, but among volunteers, it's close to 4. So that's satisfactory. So we can already see that we do have differences between volunteers and staff. In well-being, volunteers tend to do better than staff, and we will discuss this at another time, but you can probably guess why. Here's another way of representing pretty much the same thing. These are dispersion of scores among volunteers and staff in Mexico. And here you have what we call box and whisker plots. The horizontal line, again, is that 3.5 value, below which we decide that the well-being score is problematic. Not that it's very good if it's between 3.5 and 4, but you do want it to be above 4 for sure. The same is true for the meeting of the 3 basic needs, levels of engagement, willingness to stay, and how people perceive leadership and management. So these box and whisker plots say pretty much the same as the Venn plots. They just do it slightly differently, but they do give you a little more information. And this is what this slide is about. So these are also these are also box and whisker plots, but here they're presented vertically, with the scores presented vertically on the y-axis, and then different countries are located, positioned on the x-axis. So here we go. This is how you read a box and whisker plot, and this is true, for any type of data. You have the maximum value, which is 5, obviously. This is, again, the Likert scale that goes from 1 to 5, so it's quite impossible to have more than a 5 on the Likert scale. So 5 is the maximum. And you can see that in every single one of these national societies, you have volunteers scored 5 in well-being. This is well-being here. In the same way, we have a minimum score for each set of volunteers. Here in Cyprus, the minimum score is 2.1. You can just follow here, you see it's a little above 2, so 2.1. The median value separates the team here in 2. So if you say that the median value is 3.6, that means that 50% of the volunteers in Cyprus had a score that was greater than 3.6, and the other half obviously had a well-being score below 3.6. We also have the first and the third quartile. It's just like the median. So the first quartile here says that 25% of the volunteers in Cyprus have a well-being score that is below 3.2, and whereas 75% of the volunteers in Cyprus have a score that's below 4.3. You can also say that 25% of the volunteers in Cyprus have a score that's above 4.3. Finally, we have what we call outliers. This is here one individual that has a score of 1.5 in well-being, which is incredibly low. And so it's considered an outlier because it might be a mistake, it might be a glitch, it might be something. It's just one individual out of so many individuals. So that person, doesn't really need to be taken into account, but even if that person was taken into account, it wouldn't change the results. It's always good to know how many outliers we have. As you can see here, we don't have that many outliers. So this means that the people have responded, very logically to these questions. Now, this is information you can sort of deduct when you look at the results in the Moti app. But what's really interesting with data is when you start linking different variables together. And so that's called correlations. So if this increases, what happens? If for example, one variable increases, like say my supervisor listens to me, if that increases, then what happens to well-being? Does it increase or decrease? So one way of visualizing a correlation is by plotting the positions of each individual on a graph, a two-dimensional graph, where you would have, in this example, if I look at this here, I have leadership score here, and then the level of engagement here of each individual. And so when it's dark red, that means I have a high density of answers. So here in this dark red circle, I have all the respondents that gave their supervisor a 5 on 5 leadership score and a 5 on 5 engagement score. So obviously we want people to be here. This is very good. You can also notice the two dotted lines, which represent, again, the 3.5. So everything above here is good. Everything here is of concern or problematic. So we do have volunteers that are in either low on engagement, but with okay leadership, or high on engagement, but with leadership that is that can be improved, and then low in both engagement and leadership. Now, if you look at management here, this is people's perceptions of the reward system, of the status they get from the organization, and the types of returns and the opportunities offered by the Red Cross. You can sort of guess there's a kind of line here. That's the more management increases, the more engagement increases. You can sort of see the line. You see it on this graph too, where the high density, so you have lots of people here, as shown by the bar graphs here and here. But you can sort of guess that there's a line. So that line would sort of like summarize the trend. How much engagement increases when management increases. It's a line that's going upward, so it indicates that the better the management, the better the engagement, or the higher the management, the higher the engagement. So here we can say, aha, there might be something in this data. There might be a relationship between management. When management improves, engagement improves. When management decreases, then engagement decreases. So let's have a look on how we can actually test that idea. And we can do it with the scatter plot. So here we are positioning, and these are teams now. These are team averages. So each dot is a team. So teams of volunteers are in blue, and teams of staff are in dark orange. And we're positioning each team based on its autonomy score and its engagement score. So, for example, this is a big team. The larger the dot, the bigger the team. You have the scale here. So this team seems to be about 200, maybe 250 volunteers. It's in blue, so they're volunteers. And its score, its autonomy score, is just below 4, so maybe 3.9, 3.95. Its engagement score is also around 4. So that's how you position each team on the scatter plot. And then you can sort of guess, here again, that this cloud of dots is moving upward. So visually, you can sort of guess that you have a positive correlation. When autonomy increases, engagement increases. When autonomy decreases, engagement decreases. And then maybe, but I don't know if you can really see it, it seems that staff in orange seems to be a little more scattered and be slightly lower than volunteers. Well, actually, we can check. So these two lines represent a summary of the scatter plot. In other words, this line is the line that represents the smallest distance between each dot and the average. So here I've also computed the correlation coefficient, that's small r. So small r is included between -1 and +1. 0 means that there's no correlation, so basically you have dots all over the place, they're totally randomly dispersed. And then if it's a positive correlation, that means that r is greater than 0. And if it's close to 1, as we have here for the staff, 0.7, that's a strong correlation. So the closer r gets to 1, the stronger the correlation. But also, the closer r gets to -1, the stronger correlation. The only difference is that it's a negative correlation, so that means that when one variable increases, the other decreases. Here it's a positive correlation in both cases, both for volunteers and staff. This means that when autonomy scores increase, the engagement score increases. It's a positive correlation. Now, we could do this for every single pair of variables that we have in our data. So don't panic. This is a lot of information, but we could do this. In fact, I have done it. I've taken here all the factors that can explain or create or increase motivation. So the supervisor listens, understands, encourages, that we expect, according to self-determination theory, would sort of make the persons stronger. If they don't do it well, then that means that the people would be frustrated or emotionally drained. So these would be negative correlations. And also we look at status, rewards, and returns. So how the organization actually impacts people's well-being. As you notice, frustration, being emotionally drained, and feeling strong are what we call well-being indicators. Now, this is a lot, right? So if I get rid of the dots, because it's too much information, if I get rid of the dots, I get this. So this is exactly the same thing, but without the dots representing each team. It's slightly more legible. And then we can sort of look at the score. So, okay, so here, if the supervisor listens, the better the supervisor listens, the stronger people feel. Well, okay, but these are weak correlations. These are weak correlations. So there's probably not much here to see, despite the number of teams. We have 273 teams, so 273 supervisors at least. But here, look. If we look at status, the status that people see in working for the Red Cross or being a volunteer for the Red Cross, that we have a very, a relatively or rather strong correlation, especially for staff. So the better the status, the stronger I feel. I feel strong working for the Red Cross because it provides me with social status. When it comes to being emotionally drained, there's really no correlation here. There's no effect of status on emotional drain. And there's a negative correlation, though somewhat weak, between status and feeling frustrated. In other words, the more frustrated I get, right? So the more frustrated I get, the less status I feel I'm getting from the Red Cross Red Crescent. Same with rewards. But these are relatively weak correlations. So all in all, if we look a little closely, we have a strong correlation here. This is very interesting. We have also a pretty strong correlation for staff around being listened to and feeling frustrated. The more my supervisor listens, the less I feel frustrated. Now there's another way of seeing this, which is basically to say, well, let's forget the lines for a moment. Let's just look at the correlation coefficient. And so in this matrix, we have here the different factors of motivation. And here we have motivational outcomes. So I share ideas with my team. The team has a lot of meaning for me. I'm satisfied with my volunteer activity. I would like to stay. So then all you need to do is look at where you have the darkest color, because that's where you would have the strongest correlation, i.e. the highest R. So, well, let's see. If my 3 needs are met, I am more likely to be satisfied. So that's a very strong correlation. So as predicted by self-determination theory, if people's 3 needs of autonomy, belonging, and competence are met, they are more likely to be satisfied than if these needs are not met. So we have a strong positive correlation. Same thing with management. So management was, as you remember, the status conferred by the organization, the rewards, and the returns. We have a correlation of 0.6. That's a strong correlation. So this is a way of summarizing the data in terms of correlations. Now you can look at every single possible combination of variables. So this is for the Lebanese Red Cross. So you can see you have a perfect correlation of 1, and this is when you correlate one variable with itself. So this reads very much like these charts to figure out the distance between 2 cities. In orange, we have negative correlations. So being drained, being frustrated is negatively correlated with things like the 3 needs being satisfied and the reward system and all that. So that's expected. And obviously, being frustrated and being emotionally drained, these are very highly correlated with well-being, since they actually compose the well-being indicator. So that's just pure arithmetic. There's nothing to be excited about. And this is yet another way. So here we have a matrix with every single variable that we have in the database, and we can see that we have practically, as expected, the correlations that are predicted by self-determination theory. So obviously correlation does not meet causality, right? Well, that's true, unless if you already have a theory. And the Moti survey and the whole Moti program was built around a theory called self-determination theory, which I'm sure you've heard about. And this is the theory. It actually says that there is a causality between good leadership and management, the satisfaction of the 3 basic needs, and motivational outcomes like being fulfilled or engaged, or being mentally fit. So these correlations, or some of these correlations that we've seen in the scatter plots and with the lines, they could indicate an actual causality. And this is where it gets really interesting, because once you know what causes something, then you can actually address the cause rather than the symptom. So in a nutshell, self-determination theory says that volunteers and staff who have a strong sense of autonomy, belonging, and competence are more likely to be highly engaged, motivated, and energetic. It also says that if you have good leadership and good management, these 3 needs are likely to be met. So here we're going to show the same correlations, but now we're going to assume that these correlations are actually causes. And you recognize the same self-determination framework. On the left, you have what is afforded by the organization. So the returns, the rewards, and status. That is really the corporate culture. It's the management processes and policies that can affect the outcomes. The outcomes here on your right, they're in green. It's I am satisfied, I would like to stay, I share the same values as my team, I share my ideas with the team has meaning for me. These are motivational outcomes. And then here we have the soft skills of the leader. My supervisor listens to me, understands me, encourages me. And then here we have the three needs: autonomy, belonging, competence. And here we have the well-being outcomes: being frustrated, emotionally drained, or feeling strong and vigorous. So here in this particular graph, I just set the program at R being close to -1 or +1. So that way I have no correlations that are that strong. But on the next graph, I lower the threshold, and I'm asking the computer here to plot correlations that are smaller than -0.2, and these are in red. These are negative correlations, and all the strong correlations, i.e. R is greater than 0.6. And so what do I see? Well, these are correlations, but you know what? I'm putting an arrow. I'm representing the correlations by an arrow because these are predicted by self-determination theory. There's a good chance that these are actually causes. So if my national society is providing returns, so opportunities for professional development or opportunities to meet people and develop my social network, then I will feel a greater sense of belonging. That makes sense, doesn't it? And I feel if I have a greater sense of belonging, well then the team will have more meaning for me. In the same way, if I'm frustrated, if I feel frustrated, it might be that I do not feel recognized for my work, that I don't feel fairly rewarded for my effort or for my responsibilities. That will increase my frustration. So it's a negative correlation because rewards decrease and my frustration increases. In the same way, if I feel I'm not listened to, I will be more frustrated. If I do not feel understood by my supervisor, I will feel frustrated. If I do not feel I belong, then I will feel frustrated. And if I feel frustrated, my satisfaction decreases. Another negative correlation. So these are volunteers all around the world. We have close to 6,000 volunteers. And these are strong correlations, at least the positive ones. So here we have a kind of blueprint, a kind of theory, a self-determination theory for Red Cross Red Crescent volunteers. What is it that we need to look at? Well, we want to increase belonging because it has a positive impact. We want to increase autonomy because it has a positive impact. We want to decrease frustration because it has a negative impact. And how do we decrease frustration? Well, by increasing autonomy, by improving leadership skills, not least in listening and understanding, and by reviewing the reward system offered by the National Society. I think I'll stop here because this is getting very long. This is, I think, probably the easiest way to understand the data using simple correlation analysis. The way it's presented here, I think, reminds us of the value of self-determination theory to understand our own motivation and those of our colleagues and our teams. It also allows to see where we need to prioritize action in order to improve overall satisfaction in both volunteering and working for the Red Cross Red Crescent. Thank you for listening.